Since Donald Trump's return to the White House in 2025, the US has massively increased its tariffs. As a result, trade flows to the US have been disrupted. But has this affected the dynamics of global trade? And above all, are we heading towards a major restructuring of global trade? Welcome to this new episode of Macro Waves, the podcast of BNP Paribas Economic Research. Today, we are discussing a topic that had a major impact on the financial markets in April: the tariff offensive led by the US in 2025. The change is significant. Let's take two examples. First example, a German automaker. You export 3/4 of your production. Your market share in China is already declining, but you are the growth driver in the US, where until 2024, your cars were subject to very low taxes. But in 2025, the introduction of 15% custom duties on cars shatters this dynamic. The result? You try to turn to other outlets, but there aren't enough of them and you have to curtail your production. Second example. You are a Chinese exporter of electrical equipment. The US market is becoming more uncertain, with custom duties having increased by 30 percentage points. But against all odds, your exports are holding up well. Not only are they not collapsing in the US, but they are continuing to increase in the other areas. I am Stéphane Colliac, an economist, and I will be talking about the reconfiguration of international trade with Anis Ben-Saidani and Guillaume Derrien, economists in the Advanced Economies team at BNP Paribas Group Economic Research. Anis, can you provide us with a summary of the events of the last few months?
Since Donald Trump's return to the White House, the United States has massively increased its tariffs, first in April and then this summer, targeting both specific countries and sectors. As a result, the average effective tariff has increased from nearly 2% in 2024 to nearly 6 times that amount today. And the consequences are far-reaching in view of the size of the United States, which is the final destination for 15% of global goods exports.
Why did the US introduce these measures? And which sectors are the most affected?
The primary objective is to narrow the US trade deficit and generate new resources to finance the budget deficit. As such, it is leveraging its economic weight as it is a market that other countries often cannot do without. The increase in customs duties aims to reduce a competitiveness gap and goes along with incentives to expand production in the US. All this is happening in strategic sectors like automotive, steel, aluminum, and pharmaceuticals. As a result, vehicle imports are already decreasing in the United States.
What are the immediate consequences of these massive tariff increases on international trade? Or are businesses reacting, Guillaume?
There are multiple consequences, Stéphane. The first is the very strong volatility that these measures generated in global trade in the weeks preceding and following the reciprocal tariffs announcement in April, with a sharp rise in export in the first quarter, followed by a pullback in the second quarter, as well as a very pronounced sectoral effect, with, for example, a decline in the automotive sector and conversely a surge in the pharmaceutical sector. The US tariff shock also highlighted, and this is certainly the most striking dynamic, the resilience of global trade flows. While imports declined in the US, they increased in most other regions of the world, whether in Europe, ASEAN, or in Latin America. Trade flows affected by the new US tariffs account for only 9% of global trade. Global trade has thus been able to continue its upward trend, with a growth currently close to the pace comparable to the one of 2024.
We understand that the swift restructuring of global trade has not occurred in the same way across all countries and regions. Is this observation accurate?
Good question, Stéphane. What we have seen is that exports from Asia have remained particularly strong this year, despite relatively prohibitive US tariffs. China has managed to redirect a significant portion of its exports from the US to Europe, where the demand structure is similar to that of the US. China also redirected part of its export to its Asian partners. Conversely, European countries that are heavily dependent on the US market, Germany and the United Kingdom, I'm excluding Ireland, have not managed to generate sufficient new outlets to offset the decline in US demand.
Anis, can we identify any other losers? And could this impact get worse?
We can mention all the countries and sectors for which the United States is a major market and which cannot find alternatives in the short term. In terms of countries, Canada, whose exports of goods have already declined in the first half of 2025, and to a lesser extent Germany, are good examples. In terms of sectors, the automotive and metallurgy industries are the most affected. Unfortunately, others could follow. The possibility of sectoral tariffs continues to be explored in the United States for strategic projects such as pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. Next, the Supreme Court must rule on the legality of reciprocal tariffs. A ruling against the Trump administration would probably result in compensation in the form of new sectoral tariffs. Finally, there is still no formal agreement between the United States and China. And beyond trade relations between the two global superpowers, new trade conflicts may emerge.
Faced with these risks, what is your scenario for the short and medium term? Any thoughts, Guillaume?
Uncertainty remains obviously high. However, it should be noted that free trade, even under attack from US measures, remain on a solid footing. The reactions we have seen since Trump's return in 2025 are certainly partly retaliatory measures, but I note that trade partnerships have increased in recent months with the aim of diversifying markets or strengthening existing ones. For example, the European Union has just confirmed an agreement with Mercosur and sealed one with Indonesia. This situation also provides an incentive to strengthen strategic autonomy policies, which are also levers for internal growth. The implementation of a common defense effort in Europe is already having an impact.
Anis, what conclusions can we draw about this reconfiguration of trade relations?
Well, we can draw a continuum between various measures adopted in recent years by major countries. Each one is seeking to develop its local production in order to limit imports. That was the aim of China 2025, and it is also the purpose of US tariffs. The time has come more and more to develop the domestic market. It is more protected, but also more subsidized. And while its trade deficit with China continues to grow, the European Union, and Germany in particular, must take more initiatives to equip itself with the tools to face global competition as it exists today. Protecting itself when prices, particularly those charged by China, are too low, developing the internal market and a competitive offering by reducing internal barriers while remaining open to the world in order to benefit from new opportunities wherever they may arise.
In a nutshell, the US tariffs have disrupted trade flows, but the world is adapting. China and emerging Asia are benefiting, while the center of gravity of world trade is likely to shift further away from the US. One thing is certain: global trade is not standing still. It is reinventing itself. Thank you, Anis and Guillaume, for this very interesting discussion. Thank you also to our listeners for joining us. We will continue to monitor developments in international trade in the Trump era, and we invite you to read our analysis on the BNP Paribas Economic Research website. We particularly recommend the latest issue of EcoPerspectives, a publication dedicated to advanced economies, in which we focus on the reconfiguration of global trade. All links are in the description. See you soon for a new episode of Macro Waves.